Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I want to say, first of all, that Chess Audiobooks is on Chess, chess.com, Twitter, Instagram. So feel free to find me there if you want to play me in the game or just say hello. I would like to encourage everybody also, please hit that thumbs up button on the bottom. Let that be the first thing you do. That can help this channel more than anything. And of course, there's always links below with books and DVDs related to the opening on the chessboard. All right, so today we are taking another look at this book right here, Improve Your Chess Pattern Recognition. I did a video about it yesterday, and I showed one game from there, from chapter 31 on the Nievergelt maneuver. And I'm going to show you another game with the same maneuver. This time, Bobby Fischer with the white pieces going against Ulf Andersson. And this game took place in 1970 at the Siegen Olympiad in Germany. So Siegen, if you don't know, is a city in the western side of Germany. At that time, it was West Germany, as Germany had been divided to West Germany and East Germany. But now it's just on the western part of Germany. In 1970, Olympiad was won at the time by the strong Soviet Union team headed by, I have to look at my notes, Boris Spassky, of course, world champion. How could I not know that or forget that? Petrosian was on board 2. Korchnoi board 3. Polgavsky board 4. In the reserves, you had Smyslov and Geller, so very strong Soviet team. They won the gold medal that year. Second place was Hungary. Third was Yugoslavia. And unfortunately, even with the mighty Bobby Fischer on board 1, the United States was only able to come in fourth. That team was Bobby Fischer, Sammy Reshevsky, Paul Banco, Larry Evans, and who else was on there? Oh, Edmar Mednes. So they were only able to get into fourth place. So let's get into it. Let's talk about this maneuver as we get to the position in our game. So Fischer, at the peak of his powers, started out with the move B3, right? So he was definitely way ahead of time, right? As this opening became popular in the last few years or so, although with a slightly different flair to it. Andersson replied in classical form with E5, just occupying the center with his pawn. Bishop B2, attacking the pawn, knight C6, and now C4 from Fischer. So it looks kind of weird, but Fischer is actually aiming for a reverse Sicilian. So E3 is played, bishop E7, A3, castle, queen C2. All right. And now you can see how A3 is useful in that now that the queen is on C2, white doesn't have to worry about moves like knight B4 harassing the queen. Rook to E8, D3, bishop F8, knight F3, A5, bishop E2, and D5. C takes, knight BD2, and now F6, castles, and now bishop E6 from Andersson. So you can see you have a Nimzo-Larsen opening, right, to be proper, but it's a Sicilian with the colors reversed, and we know that Fischer was a great exponent of the Sicilian defense with the black pieces, and so you see him playing the Sicilian attack, right? That doesn't sound right, but the Sicilian with the colors reversed. All right, so after bishop E6, Fischer began the Nievergelt maneuver, and this is the basic plan: is to play king over the H1, or if you're black, king to H8, and the rooks to the G file, and then if you can, double up the rooks and then push the G pawn. A major component that the opponent will usually have in the position is this lever. So in this case, it's this F6 pawn, so that G4, G5 can be played, and in exchange or can result in opening up the G file for white. All right, and you will see that with colors reversed and in different opening systems. It's just a good tool to have in the arsenal, and that's why I recommend this particular book, because he gives a good amount of examples, right? Like I showed you in the last video, this maneuver, and also in this video. And there's another Fischer game where he actually uses the same maneuver with the black pieces. All right. So it's not the only idea in the position, but it's a tool to add in your arsenal, because you can also play, traditionally with a move like knight e4, and there's nothing wrong with that move. Okay, but this plan is more active. All right, and I think it brings more of a stress factor to black, in that he has to think about actually being attacked at this point. Game continued, queen d7, so solid play from Andersson. Rook g1, rook a d1. So there's nothing wrong with black's position, right? It's not like he's losing or anything, right? Position's pretty equal. Black has more space, right? In the center, and all his pieces are developed, right? So he should probably be trying to figure out a plan of attack here. Knight e4 now from Fischer. And of course that knight is looking at that c5 square. And so queen f7. g4. And now g6 from Andersson. Positional move, a little passive. And you can see I've highlighted some of the ideas here for black. So he wants to play bishop g7. All right. And the reason why I highlighted the green arrow on the f6 pawn is to show you that if white tries to advance his pawn with g5, then he will just keep the position closed with f5. All right, so that's black's idea there. Only downside really about taking the dark square bishop off the f8 a3 diagonal is then the c5 square is a little bit soft, and white could land a piece in there without having to worry about getting it traded by the bishop. A little more aggressive for black. Instead of g6, a little more testing for white would have been move like knight b6. All right, and now you're asking white, hey, what are you going to do about that b3 pawn? All right, and play can continue knight fd2, for example, with the rich game. Let's say bishop e7, rook ac1, typical Sicilian play down the c file, rook d7, protecting the c pawn, perhaps planning on moving the knight on c6 at some point. And now I wanted to show you this variation so you can see this idea, this Nievergelt idea in action. So rook g3, rook f8, right? So black is not being too active. Rook cg1, and you see the rook just shuffling back and forth, right, for demonstration purposes. And now f4. And you can see the purpose of white's play. He has this bishop on b2, but it's biting on granite right now with the pawns on e5, f6, and g7. Right? So f4 is designed to start to undermine this. F4, and eventually at the right time g5, and open up the g file so that the rooks and bishop are coordinated. So let's say e takes f4, queen f8. Now g5, f5, keeping the position closed, but there's a tactic here. Knight f6. Bishop takes, g takes, g6, still keeping the position closed. And that is just a small example of the type of play that white gets when he performs this particular maneuver. Can bring a lot of pressure to bear on the opponent's position. And again, this is just a sample variation here. Rook breaks through. There's a lot of play in this position, but again, I just wanted to give you an example of what it could look like, what the play could look like there. So let's get back on track with the game. So instead of that more active move, knight b6, Andersson went with g6. So Fischer continued, rook g3, bishop g7, rook a g1. Now he played knight b6, attacking that b3 pawn. But Fischer has knight c5, attacking the bishop, light square bishop, and the pawn on b7. So the bishop is a good bishop and wants to retreat and protect the pawn. This gives white a tempo, right? Since the bishop basically undeveloped itself. And Fischer goes to h4. And now Andersson wants to get rid of that annoying knight on c5, right? So he plays knight d7. But not only does he do that, he has another idea in mind to transfer his knight also to the king side and try to fortify it more over there. Fischer plays knight e4. Good move because he doesn't allow the trade. After all, when your opponent is cramped, you don't want him to trade pieces. You don't want to trade pieces. You want him to be cramped. After all, he's blocked his bishop now on c8, and he's blocked his rook on d8. So Fischer just returns back to the center. Andersson moves the knight again. He plays f8. And now Fischer has a very strong move. After all, you must think of it like this. The way white's pieces are set up, his bishop on b2 and his rooks on the g file, if white is not able to break through on the a1 h8 diagonal or the g file, then the then the position of the pieces looks a little dubious because they will serve no purpose. So Fischer's setup, demands that these ranks and these files and diagonals be open. So Fischer plays a very strong continuation here, knight f5. All right, compelling black, putting the pressure on black to open up the g file. All right, Andersson doesn't do it. He just plays bishop e6. He brings the bishop back out and harasses the b3 pawn again. All right. And that was a wise move because if he takes here, g takes f5, g takes f5, and all hell is going to break loose, basically. Right? What do you do here? You have to play a move like knight to g6 or king h8, and then just simply rook takes. And then you lose the queen. And white is going to be active enough. F4, this idea exposing the diagonal. And this is good for white. So Andersson played bishop e6. He didn't want any of that. So knight c5. Now, I've highlighted the e5 square because I want you to see how black in this particular position has his knight on c6, which protects the e5 square. And also the bishop on g7, which also protects e5 indirectly, along, of course, with the f6 pawn. All right? Because, again, I already mentioned how important it is for white to have access to the a1 h8 diagonal and also the opening of the g file. Because white's whole game is centered around that, the way his pieces are set up. All right? So it's imperative for black to make sure that white doesn't get what he wants here. So notice what happens now. The first move, Andersson plays a knight e7. Again, he wants that annoying knight out of there. But when he plays knight e7, notice I only have one arrow pointing to e5 now, because the removal of that knight from c6 takes one defensive piece away from the protection of e5. So knight takes g7. Now guess what? There's no more pieces protecting e5. King takes g7, and guess what? Fischer gets his wish, because now that move we mentioned earlier, f5, does not work because of the vulnerability of the pawn on e5. Okay, notice there's nothing protecting the pawn on e5, so except f6. So now if the f6 pawn moves to f5, then it's just bishop takes check. All right, so this is why knight f5 was just played. But now the diagonal is very weak. Okay, let me go back. So instead of knight e7 here, Andersson would have did better to just keep the protection on e5 and play, say, a move like bishop c8. Okay, now knight takes g7, king takes g7, and at least you have the rook on e8, knight on c6, and it's still a battle for white to try to break through. You know, white could play h4, for example. Let's say king h8, bishop f3, and the fight, the fight continues. Okay, that would have added a little more struggle to the chess battle here. So knight e7 was played. Knight takes, and again, strong move by Fischer. Knight f5, rook to f3, and now b6, and now g takes f6, king h8. Doesn't want anything to do with that pawn on that diagonal. All right, king h8, and now knight takes e6, rook takes e6, d4. Very powerful. And I put a lot of arrows here because to show you that Fischer, I mean, we know Fischer was strong, but this is like Fischer at his peak. Like this is Fischer at his best. 1970, from like 70 to 72, Fischer was like unbelievable. And this one move, simple move, d4, has so like so many threats. It's just crazy. So first he's threatening, of course, bishop c4, and you can see the skewer on the rook and queen there. All right. He's also threatening to open up the long diagonal. We've been talking about that the entire game. All right. This diagonal, and look where the black king happens to be, right on the dark square in h8. Okay. So Andersson plays e takes d4, bishop c4, but Andersson has an answer, and he's gonna just play d3. And now Fischer just doesn't do a move, like many rookies would do, which say move the queen to d2 or something like that. No, Fischer simply takes. He plays bishop takes d3 because now he's threatening to capture the knight, which would, of course, open the g file, win another pawn, okay, and then threaten, say, like rook g7, for example, moving the queen in front of the blockade square f7, and then you can advance the pawn. All right. This practically forces Andersson to give up the exchange. Rook takes d3, queen takes d3, rook d6. Now queen c4, of course, offering an endgame, but the main idea is to remove the queen from this blockade square with f7. Of course, Andersson doesn't want to move on knight e6. Bishop e5, hitting the rook. Rook goes back to d8. h4, still working on opening the g file. Knight d6. Queen g4. Knight f8. h5. Right? Notice the focus of Fischer the entire game. A1 H8 diagonal, G file. Ever since he started executing that Nievergelt maneuver, that's been the strategy. Right? He's not to be turned away. 98, and you can see Andersson is trying his best to stop the onslaught of Fischer, but I mean, he was just so strong at this time. Fischer just plays e4 as the b3 pawn is attacked by the queen there. Not that it's really a threat of being captured. Even stronger here, not to criticize Fischer, but even stronger is queen h4. And the idea is very simple. It's basically, again, to take on g6 and take advantage of all of the pinning scenarios around the king. So, for example, let's give white a few moves. H takes g6, knight takes g6, rook takes g6. Notice the h pawn can't capture because of the pin, so the queen would have to capture. And now f7. f7 is devastating because, again, there's too many threats. The king is in check on h8. The rook is on prise on d8. The knight is on prise on e8. All right. And Fischer is threatening to make a queen. All right. Of course, the only move that can be done there is queen to g7, and then mate would follow immediately after f8, queen or rook, checkmate. All right, so powerful idea, and you can see, of course, in this variation, all of white's goals have been accomplished. Right, the a1 h8 diagonal is open, and the g file is open also. After queen h4, Fischer did e4, and Andersson played rook d2, rook h3, similar idea, of course. King g8, h takes g6, g file finally starts to get open. Knight g6, f4, and you can see what's coming. f5, right, is depend on the king. So the king moves. And now queen g5, devastating move. And the idea behind queen g5 is, if you notice, the rook is unprotected here on d2. So the idea is to check on h6, right? So you can force the king to move back into the pin of the rook on g1. And then you can play a move like f5 with a double attack or something, something to that nature. Like, so for example, I'll give white another move. So queen h6, let's say king comes back, because of course you could give your knight up on g7, but then white would play queen takes h7 check, etc. So f5, and now you can see the double attack. The knight is pinned on g6 by the rook on g1, and the rook is attacked on d2. So rook d1, right? what else are you gonna do? And then you just take that. So after queen g5, Andersson played knight d6, and then of course Fischer just snatched the piece off, check, and the result is gonna be the same. And so Andersson resigned at this point, and a young oaf Andersson too. He didn't really come into his own till later, but man, what an experience to be a young chess player and then run into Fischer at his absolute peak, when he was a machine, right? He didn't run into the Bobby Fischer with the beard, the bushy bearded Bobby Fischer. He didn't run into that guy, the 1992 Bobby Fischer, who was still strong, but he didn't run into that guy. He ran into the Fischer that had the the clean cut sideburn, the clean cut sideburns right here, clean shaven, doing those old school calisthenic exercises and sit-ups. The Fischer that was just focused on chess 100% of the time. That's who Ulf Andersson ran into. He ran into the juggernaut Fischer. Just running through walls. Like, that's who he ran into. So much respect for Andersson for lasting for 43 moves. I think at this stage in his career, Fischer could have played any opening he wanted to play, and it wouldn't have mattered. He would have won. He was winning. I mean, you even see it in the World Championship against Spassky, him playing Alicon defense. And I like Alicon's defense. He played it twice in the World Championship, didn't lose, and won one game. I think he could have just played anything. He was so his gap between him and his closest second was just incredible. And I don't want to get into my Fischer rant because what he did was amazing. I mean, you had the whole Soviet chess school like working against him for years, and they still couldn't stop him from winning the title. Because it wasn't like they just heard of Fischer in 1972. They saw Fischer's rising through the ranks, through the years. They studied him, watched his games, etc., etc. They've been watching that guy for years. They've been preparing for years, taking notes on him for years. They knew his style, right? They had many Grandmaster games, many examples to go off of, and they still couldn't stop him. That's incredible to me. But anyway, I digress. Going off on a tangent there. Anyway, I hope you like that video. I recommend you get that book. The links will be in the box below down there. Please support my channel. If you can't donate or purchase a book, just hit that thumbs up button, because that's like a donation too. Hitting that thumbs up, that helps my videos get seen. Share my videos. Spread the word. If you have Facebook or whatever, just put it on there. Twitter, just share my videos. We're gonna get this chess knowledge out there. And again, I'm on Lee Chess, chess.com, Twitter, and Instagram. So get in those comments below. Let me know what you think, and enjoy the rest of your day. And I will see you guys soon on the next video.